Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Common Hour. My name is Rick Moog. I am chair of the Common Hour Committee and professor of chemistry here at F&M. Before we begin with today's presentation, I want to let you know that next week, Common Hour will feature John Sexton, President Emeritus of New York University and Dean Emeritus of NYU School of Law, and Benjamin Butler, Professor of Law. He's going to be speaking on baseball as a road to God. Very appropriate, as spring training will be beginning next week. Also, I'd like to thank this week's pizza servers, the InterVarsity Christian Fellowship. InterVarsity Christian Fellowship is an interdenominational, multi-ethnic movement of students who are curious, interested, or committed to following Jesus at F&M and the world around. They have large group gatherings at 9 p.m. on Wednesday nights on the second floor of the College Center, and small group gatherings throughout the week. So, as many of you know, Paula Vogel was our scheduled speaker for today, and she unfortunately had to cancel at the last minute. However, fortunate for us, her agent, Jonathan Lomma, who is an F&M alum, class of '99, has graciously offered to talk in her place, and so we really appreciate him filling in at the last minute, and we're excited to hear what he has to say. There will be a question and answer period at the end of the presentation. Please plan to stay until the end of the Q&A session, and as always, Common Hour will end promptly no later than 12:30. When we have the question and answer session, it is open to members of the F&M community, and we give first priority to students. We appreciate it if you would, if you have a question, if you form a line at each of these two microphones, so our speaker has a sense of how many questions he has to address. And when you ask your question, please state your name, year, or college affiliation. And now I'd like to introduce Carrie Sharon Wright, Director of the Philadelphia Writers House and Associate Teaching Professor of English.
Thank you, Rick. Good morning, everyone. Before I begin, I would like to thank all the co-sponsors for today's event: the Common Hour Committee, the English Department, the Department of Theater, Dance, and Film, the Office of Student and Postgraduate Development, and I'd also like to thank the director, cast, and crew of our upcoming student production of Kingdom City. Thank you all. Woo. And welcome to McCaskey students. So it is my honor to introduce today's Common Hour speaker, Jonathan Lomma, class of 1999. Jonathan Lomma is a William Morris Endeavor theatrical agent whose list of clients is a who's who of the major dramatists of stage and screen. His clients include Paula Vogel, Kenneth Lonergan, my favorite playwright, Terrence McNally, Craig Lucas, Beth Henley, Ken Ludwig, Sharr White, Jose Rivera, Dorothy Fortenberry, and Robert L. Freedman, among many others. Lomma also represents the literary estates of some of America's most immortal icons, among them Edward Albee, I just learned how to pronounce his name, Jerome Robbins, Howard Ashman, Arthur Laurents, A.R. Gurney, and Joseph Masteroff. Jonathan Lomma's current projects include Steven Spielberg's remake of West Side Story by Arthur Laurents and Jerome Robbins, scheduled to begin filming this spring, the Broadway and international productions of ANASTASIA by Terrence McNally, and ALADDIN by Howard Ashman, the current Broadway revival of the WAVERLY Gallery by Kenneth Lonergan, starring Elaine May, and the just-announced Broadway production of Frankie and Johnny in the CLAIR de LUNE, also by Terrence McNally, to star Michael Shannon and Audra McDonald. Jonathan Lomma graduated from Franklin and Marshall College with B.A.s in English and Theater, and he holds a JD from American University's Washington College of Law, and he lives with his wife and children in Bronxville, New York. Particularly in my role at the Writers' House at F&M, I get to meet a lot of alumni. One thing you may not know about alumni, current students, is that they are just like you. Maybe Tinder hadn't yet been invented, and there was something called flirting instead. And there was no place on campus to wait online for 2 hours to get coffee. But in the most important ways, they lived as you live, ratcheting back and forth between the schoolwork due today and their growing apprehension of who they might want to be when they're all grown up. Just as you do, alumni wondered if the things that gave them bliss in college could be things they did their whole lives. How to balance the knowledge of oneself as a person with talents and passions, civic, intellectual, athletic, artistic, and the impending responsibilities of adulthood. Rent must be paid. Bills will come due. Your deeply loving, somewhat oppressive families will want to know what you were doing with all that expensive education. Thank you for laughing. It's very nerve-wracking up here, and when you laugh, I just feel so much better. Okay. Do you stake your life on that one thing you love, make your passion a side gig, abandon it altogether and go for the sure thing? This struggle is real, and just like you, F&M alumni have faced it. Jonathan Lomma, 99, experienced his bliss in college as a double major in English and theater. He had come to F&M after years as a child actor in community theater, and at F&M he performed in 7 green room productions, a school record as far as I know. He remembers 4 years of living in the costume shop and the green room, soaking up everything he could about every aspect of theater. It was his life, and then he graduated. I'm going to leave it to Jonathan to explain the particulars of what happened next, but some highlights along the way. As you know, he earned a law degree, he got married and had a family, and as you've heard, he also became the most sought-after theatrical agent for playwrights in the country. We are so proud to claim Jonathan as an F&M alumnus. He found a way, the only way he could have found, to live out his passion while making a life, just like you will. Please welcome Jonathan Lomma.
I have a list here of train times and all the places I have to be. And there's a helpful note at the bottom that says, 2 weeks ago they had an anthropologist who won a MacArthur Award who spoke about the patrol policy between Mexico and Texas. Last week someone spoke about Palestinian rights. I can only hope my talk about Broadway completes what is clearly designed to be a trilogy of the most important issues facing us today. Okay. When I was a student here, we had, this memory came back to me last night, we had a really esteemed alum come back who was really doing amazing things in theater. And he gave a speech at the Green Room Theater, and we were so enthralled by him. About halfway through the speech, he said, you know, it's so strange. All you want is to be up here where I am. And all I want is to be back there where you are. And I remember thinking, he's nuts. And I totally understand what he meant, because I would give anything to go back in time and be here again. The 4 years I had here were, without exaggeration, the best 4 years of my life. We did shows in the Green Room, we did Shakespeare, Shepard, Beaumarchais, Moliere, David Ives. I directed and did costumes in the Other Room Theater. I had my own key by the time I left to the Other Room Theater. It no longer works. I went by last night. I was the cartoonist for 3 years for the College Reporter, the programmer for Ben's Underground for I think a year or two. I loved it here, and it is still a holy place for me. And I feel that it was where I found myself. I had support from great teachers, Virginia West, chief among them, who's still here. That's right. John Whiting, Dorothy Louise, who were wonderful guides. In the English department, Joel Volker, Jeff Steinbrink, Sandy Pinsker, who was crazy, and I just loved him, and best of all, Suzanne Woods. I was so excited when James Lapine asked me if Paula Vogel would come speak to you, and it was so exciting to arrange that and feel, in a way, a vicarious thrill. I think I even said to her, you know, when you're up there, when you're going to be up there speaking, Paula, I'm going to be right there with you. And I'm so sad that you're not going to have that opportunity to hear from her today, and I know we're trying to reschedule that. I think this might be the first time in recorded history that an agent has actually stood in for the talent. I see a new growth opportunity for the agency, a new business area. So 36 hours ago, I became an understudy. And I'm not going to spend too much time on what an agent is. You've all seen agents on TV. I have cousins who are doctors, and they say, you know, Jonathan, when you watch Grey's Anatomy, that's not, doctors are not like that. That's not what happens in a hospital. When I was in law school, they would have to say, you know, Jonathan, you can't, when you go up to the witness, you know, you can't like loosen your tie and then start gesturing. Like that's real lawyering is not like Law and Order. Lawyers are not really like they are on TV. I met an archaeologist who was like, oh, sweetie, I know you love those Indiana Jones movies, but you know, it's not, being an archaeologist is really not like that. If you've seen an agent on TV, that's it, that's what it is. You have the idea. The only difference I would say between what you've probably seen often is the film and TV agent persona. The theater agent, the theater is a very different world culturally. And I just want to spend a little time explaining it because it's instructive, because it's kind of the world I operate in, and it gives context for some of the other stuff I'm going to say. In the theater, the playwright owns and controls their work and is at the top of the food chain. And that is an extraordinarily significant distinction. It is an artist-first enterprise. It's the opposite in film and television, which is a studio-centric and director-centric medium. And what that means is the screenwriters, for the most part, do not fully own their screenplays. They do not control their screenplays. Their screenplays can be taken away from them after they fulfill their obligation. They can be rewritten by other people. It's the difference in a way between being an artist and a craftsperson. And this isn't surprising. This is what they sign up for. In the movies, you get all the money up front. Command large fees. The best screenwriters command the largest fees. Playwriting is really a speculative enterprise. If the play's a hit, you'll make the money in either the play itself on Broadway or in the stock and amateur licensing that happens. So it's a lot more of a speculative business. And that's what I love about it. I love that when you're talking to a playwright, the playwright, to decide what they're going to write, they're not checking a market. They're not finding out what the studios think will sell. They're just asking themselves, gosh, what can't I get my mind to shut up about? And that's what I'm going to write about. You know, in Hollywood, some of you may know this, they do research like you can't believe on all of us. And they have broken all of us down into 4 groups. Women under the age of 25, women over the age of 25, men under the age of 25, and men over the age of 25. There's 4 file cabinets. And they believe that they have figured out what each of those groups wants. I mean, young women in the audience, think of all your friends. Are you like any of them? Are all the likes and interests the same? No, you're probably a very unique individual. But in Hollywood terms, they have a list of what they think you need to see in a movie. And what they're trying to do every day of their lives is create what's called a 4-quadrant movie. And a 4-quadrant movie is a movie that could potentially appeal to all 4 of those groups. And if they hit that right, they'll make, untold billions. The famous examples of 4-quadrant movies are things like Titanic and Jurassic World, and the Star Wars movies they make sure now are these 4-quadrant movies. If your skin is crawling a little bit when you hear that, like, I'm with you. That's how movies get made. What will sell? Harry Potter is based on excellent source material, but also perfect examples of material that can be made to be a 4-quadrant film. A playwright doesn't follow the market like those guys do. The producers read the play and say, wow, I've never seen anything like this before. Somebody said that Hollywood is, it's a business based on surprising you in just the way you expected. They're trying to repeat last year's success, either with a straight sequel or with a film that hits all the beats of a previous success, but is called something different. And the secret to success in straight playwriting seems to be the opposite. Can you write a play that no one's ever seen before, or will again? Paula Vogel's Indecent, which was on Broadway recently and was a Tony Award nominee, is an example of that. No one had ever seen that story told that way, with those methods. And she kind of invented a whole world way of being for that play, existed just for the time it took to tell that play. Now she's onto something completely different. And by the way, if someone tries to imitate it, it will be evident that that's what it is, and it will likely have a check mark against it. So there's 2 different business models. Thank you for indulging that tangent. So, an agent. Webster says an agent is a person or thing, I love that takes an active role or produces a specific effect. And that's what an agent does. An agent pretty much does 3 basic things. The agent has the raw material of the artist, whether it's an actor's ability or a book, piece of writing, piece of music, and they have to match it to the correct producer, the producer that will do the best job with it, that is the most interested, the best placed to help that thing get birthed. That goal having been achieved, the second thing that an agent does is do the deal, manage the deal process, create the contract that governs, sure, the money, but all kinds of things, the amounts of uses, the amount of time the thing can be used in, all kinds of ancillary rights. And then when that's done, the third thing is the kind of policing of the business arrangement for as long as it lasts between your client, the artist, whatever stripe they may be, and the producer or employer they're working with. This is the most unpredictable area, by the way. Lots of things can happen, both good and bad, in the actual creation of the piece that are very hard to predict. The first 2 things, matching it up to the right person and doing the deal, those are the things that you kind of see very far ahead, but the issues that come up that you have to help the artist navigate are often the most unexpected. And I guess there's probably a 4th umbrella of things, which is you are a champion for this artist. You're a champion for the script they give you in an acute sense, but in a larger sense, that author or artist person you are an advocate for that, and the spokesperson in the business world for that. So it's vital, especially I think on the lit side, to really understand and work to understand what your artist is doing, what they are trying to achieve, and be able to speak artfully about their work as best as you can. Nothing speaks for the work like the work itself. That's the problem with Hollywood. They do coverage. They don't actually read the script. So you could get coverage that says, kid comes home from college, he finds out his house is haunted. Not only that, his uncle has married his mother. That could sound like an episode of Gilligan's Island, unless you were to read Shakespeare's words and see that the story is told a lot more artfully than that. So for my talk, I thought I'd give you some advice about working in the entertainment business for those of you who think that that could be interesting. So this is primarily aimed at actors, writers, artists, but I hope there'll be some value for the rest of you as well. There's some general, I suppose, career advice thrown in. And any of you business majors who like the arts, you know, there's hope for you. I kind of came to it backwards. I feel like I was a very right-brained, artistic, unorganized person that fitted myself through going to law school, fitted myself into the business side. But the other thing is possible. The other thing is that someone who's just naturally a business-oriented person who has a predilection for the arts, that's also a really viable way to do it. I'm going to give you 10 suggestions. These are not 10 commandments. These are pieces of information that worked for me. They're closely held beliefs that I have about thriving in the entertainment business. In many cases, there are things that I wish I learned earlier, had explained to me earlier, kind of figured out earlier. And again, there are many paths to the top of the mountain. This just happens to be my specific view. I don't think if you had another person similarly positioned that they could probably have 10 different things or maybe disagree with some of this. Number one, do what you love. That sounds so nice. But if I did what I loved, I would have been a professional magician doing backyard birthday parties my entire life. In fact, the bio that I provided the school was missing one sentence, which was recently inducted to the Academy of Magical Arts in the famous Magic Castle in Hollywood, California. That's right. The variety arts do get some love, definitely. However, I would have been a mediocre one. I had friends who were doing it, and they were really excellent. And the universe was kind of showing me that I couldn't probably be the best at that, as much as I loved myself doing it. Or maybe I would have been a costumer or a set designer. These are things I flirted with. Only mediocre. Good, but maybe not good enough. So do what you love. It sometimes to me feels like fortune cookie wisdom that can be blinding. And I think there are three important questions. And I think what do you love is the first of those three questions. Because we should all do what we love. I love my job. I love my job. But there are two other questions I asked myself to fit myself into this job and figure it out. The second question, what am I good at? And not just what am I good at, like objectively, what would people say maybe am I better at than most people? And then the third, honestly, how can I best help a family? How can I support a family? And it creates a kind of Venn diagram of three circles. And the idea is that the hope is there may be something in that place where those three circles intersect. And this is retrospectively that I'm figuring out this is what I did. I didn't plan this and then make a little diagram. I did it, but in an unorganized way. After law school, I spent a year trying to figure things out, and my girlfriend, who's now my wife, gave me a book that was something like the 100 Best Places to Work with a Law Degree. And number 93 was the William Morris Agency Gallery. And I read, and when I was a kid, I had very briefly done some acting, so I knew about agents, but I don't know, I never connected it until I read this paragraph. And it was just the closest thing I've ever had in my life to an epiphany. I just realized, my God, that's it. That is the thing. And I think I'm lucky to have had that moment, but I think those were the three questions that were at work. If I went just for the money after law school, I probably would have been a corporate lawyer, maybe in entertainment, and I would have been an okay lawyer. I was a mediocre law student. And then what was I good at? Hold on. I have to check things off as I talk about them. What was I good at? I knew theater inside and out. Never thought that could be useful. I felt very at home talking to artists. I felt so alive. It's such a mysterious process. Guy goes into a room, woman goes into a room with a blank piece of paper. They come out with, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf? How does that happen? To talk to these people, it's like trying to solve a mystery in a way for me. I love talking to artists. I felt at home doing it. I had acted. I was in the acting unions by the time I got here. I was a theater major. And in law school, there were 3 areas where I was not mediocre, where I was really better than the rest of the classes. And that was copyright and trademark law. These are the laws that govern the arts. There was an ability I had to just sort of understand immediately what those laws were for, the thinking that went into them. I had a lot of context for those laws that I could think about. So I did very well in that. Courtroom stuff, because of the time I spent in the green room. And then one thing really surprised me in my last year at law school that turned out I had some ability in. In my 3rd year in law school, I was in DC, we went into the inner city and we worked with people as about to be licensed lawyers with supervisors. We worked with people who felt were unfairly targeted by law enforcement and kind of worked with them on their cases and kind of took them to resolution. And all of the people that I was assigned to, who were, I guess, my first clients, they all reported similar versions of the following to my supervisor. Things like this. They felt like they were my only clients, was one quote. They felt I really cared about them. And even when things didn't work out, they felt some justice because they felt heard by someone who cared. And I have to tell you, the reason this surprised me is because I did not really self-identify as a touchy-feely person, or really even as a very nice person. I was not trying to validate anybody. I was just trying to see if I could get a result. And it's just that when you're in there talking to people, they're not lawyers. They don't want to sit there and say what lawyers want to hear. These are the 5 issues, here's this. They want to tell you about things that are unrelated. Well, you don't learn that in law school. You learn the bullet points about how to diagnose a problem. And often, I guess I learned lawyers, that's what they want. And they're sort of shut down to the human side. I don't know, I kind of was artistic. I would sit there and these people would talk about their lives, and I thought it was very valuable to the problems at hand. And so that was something I really paid attention to, because it was that rare thing. You're good at something you didn't even know you were trying for. That's like never happened to me again. So I paid attention to it. So I did this Venn diagram in my mind somehow, and there it was. A theatrical agent for plays and musicals, an advocate for writers, an advocate for people expressing themselves. Number 2, promote yourself. Have no shame. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. My father was first generation in America. He was born to an Italian immigrant shoemaker. I was the first in my family to get a college degree. My father was a World War II vet. He had me late in life. My mother she was much younger than him, but she fell just shy of the baby boomer range. So I was that weird thing. I was a Gen X kid who grew up with zero baby boomer influence. Part of why college was so great, I thought it went right from Eisenhower to Reagan. So part of why college was so great was I learned about all kinds of new things like the Beatles and Woodstock and Jimmy Carter and analysis and Watergate and self-investigation. And so I didn't have the benefit of a lot of baby boomer wisdom, but I also was not burdened by it. And the watchword in my family, the sort of the phrase was promote yourself. You know, my father would always say, you stop too soon. That's your problem. You know, your work is great. You sort of do your work and you sit there and you think, all right, evaluate me. And he's like, that's not enough. It was kind of like nobody's waiting for you. You ever see these things? Class of 1999. That's, you know, how old I am. Class of 1999. The world is waiting for you. No, actually, I discovered no one was excitedly sitting at their desk in Hollywood saying, Jesus, I cannot wait to find out what the class of 1999 brings to Hollywood. But school is kind of deceptive because for 12 to 15 years you do your work and you get promoted. You get a B, you get a C minus. I'm not talking about myself. And you get promoted, and then you you hit the world and nobody's investigating your worth. And promotions aren't the rule, they're kind of the exception. So it was sort of only really after I left that I fully, truly felt that I heard what my father had been trying to say all these years, which is that you have to err on the side of just proclaiming your worth. And if you lose opportunities because someone thinks you're braggadocio, that you're overconfident, learn from it, correct, but you can quantify why you lost the opportunity. Whereas if you lose opportunities because you were too quiet, you didn't raise your hand, you didn't speak, you're not going to know it. You're not going to be able to quantify it. You know, I tell my assistants, it's just vital that you speak up in meetings. Honestly, even if you make a fool of yourself, everybody else is interested in what they are saying. No one will remember that you spoke. No one will actually, I'm sorry, no one will remember what you said. They'll only just remember that you spoke. And so I just think it's vital to speak up. Number 3, tell the truth. Okay, but do it loudly. Self-promotion is not lying. Don't deceive. Acknowledging the flaws in yourself or whatever you're selling is incredibly disarming. It is actually its own kind of salesmanship to acknowledge shortcomings, places for growth, things that don't work. It shows the people you're speaking with and trying to persuade that the things you're saying that are positive are probably true, if you are acknowledging the downside. So, cast everything in a favorable light. That's different from being deceptive in any way. And keep in mind, vulnerability, this is something I wish I learned my freshman year here and didn't. Vulnerability is a very human thing, and it's a fine thing to allow people to say in interviews, anywhere. Number 4, if you want to be a big deal in the entertainment world, it's actually very simple to get started. You get hired as a secretary, assistant, as we say. You know, I read somewhere, I don't know the statistics, but I read somewhere that American copyright, the American entertainment business, is the largest export that we have. Between all of the content, all of the networks, the streaming, the film companies, plays, books. The entertainment business in this country is enormous. There are millions of people employed in it, and yet it is mysterious and somehow invisible, and hardly any classes in it, and nobody speaks about it. And it is, and it's everywhere, and many people want to be in it. Well, how do you get in? If you get hired as an assistant, 50% of your job is done. You have gotten yourself backstage. You are in the door, as they say. And luckily for all of us, for me, the entertainment business remains what I've heard described as a soft business. You want to be in the best law firm in the world, you need to have been in the top 5% of your class at Harvard. You want to operate at Mount Sinai, same thing. But it's not the same in the entertainment business. They aren't looking at that. They're looking at how you evaluate material. They're looking at how you present yourself in the room, what's passionate to you, and can you get your job done, be punctual. It's a more old world set of values. We operate on what can be best described as a medieval guild system. You apprentice. You apprentice to the master, and then you very slowly become a master. Nobody hires you out of law school to run the company. You get your foot in the door and you learn. And this is kind of boring, but important. There are 4 stages of this that I see. I saw it myself, and I saw it with my own assistants. You're marinating in this, it's the best kind of graduate school. You're marinating in the day-to-day of the world. So first, you're unconsciously incompetent. You have no idea what you don't know. You get there, you're proud of yourself, you're proud of your knowledge. Hey, look at me, you don't know anything. And then very slowly, as I did, you start to be like, oh, there's a lot of things I don't know. I didn't know this, I didn't know this guy. I would never have thought that that's so counterintuitive. I never would have done it that way. And then slowly, you become unconsciously competent. You've begun to pick up so much that without realizing it, you have better judgment. You understand the reasons for what's happening around you, in my case, at an agency, where stars were coming in and they were being advised on their career. You start understanding why your boss is giving that advice. You understand what's in their mind. You almost read their mind at a certain point. And then eventually you're consciously competent. You can sit there and take stock and say, oh, now I know something. And that process is always ongoing. Believe me, there's all kinds of things I know all about that I don't know anything about and I'm about to find out. But it's an ongoing process, and it really is the best kind of graduate school. So if you're interested in this idea, what you do is you make a list of the 5 major agencies, and you'll put number 1 as WME. You would make a list of the 5 major film studios: Broadway producers, book publishers, publicists, casting agencies, TV networks, streaming services, music publishing firms, major internet companies that are getting into content. That's 50 businesses that employ people and have HR people, lots of them. And now you apply to those places, like all in the same week. You don't stretch it out over a year. Like, you just get it done, and then you move on to the next 50 that didn't make the list. And all you need is one positive response. All you need is one place of employment, your foot's in the door. And now if you're working at, say, an agency, but you think, gosh, this isn't for me, I really wish I were in film development. Well, your agency experience now puts you in the very, very top of a very, very different pile when you apply to Disney, say. Because you're not green, they're not taking a chance on you, you've been in the world. And you have a recommendation. Your boss will call his friend over at Disney, and you are now behind the scenes. A law school professor I had, as part of an internship I had in my final year in law school, he heard that I was getting coffee for the person that I was interning for. And he took me aside and he said, "You are about to be a lawyer. Do not get coffee. That is, your job is, high level. This is what you should be doing. Our law school doesn't want to do this program so that you could be there getting coffee." The guy whose coffee I was getting was John Simpson, one of the great music managers. He was very big at the Recording Industry Association of America, where I was working. And ultimately, though many people helped me get my job at WME, his was the letter that ultimately did it. Because I was game, because I was intrigued in doing the job and doing the menial stuff, improving myself, because it's the way the business works. After passing the New York bar, I went to work as an assistant at WME. I started at under $30,000 while my friends went to work in law firms with starting salaries of sometimes $150,000. And a lot of people thought I was nuts. I mean, a lot of people thought I was truly, like, what are you doing? But honestly, my mom and dad didn't think I was nuts. And that support was, we did that for 5 years as an assistant with a law degree. And their support was important. And the way I thought about it was, I've spent so many years and so many miles to get into this building, talking to these people. I could see the desk I want. It's 10 feet away in that office. It felt important to stick around. Number 5, know your job, but know even more than that. So let's say you're an assistant at Disney or Universal or Sony or Paramount and you want to get noticed. You love movies, you love songs, you are a regular imbiber of pop culture. Pop culture is something everyone can talk about. Start now developing a large body of knowledge about a subject that probably was like things happened before you were born. Nothing impresses entertainment people like, this is just an example, being able to speak extemporaneously about classic film. So don't be the assistant who wants to talk about how much they love Star is Born. We all cried. Be the person who maybe prefers the 1954 version starring Judy Garland over the 1937 original, and then maybe spend a minute talking about Barbra Streisand's excellent performance in 1976. before getting into how Lady Gaga is her natural successor, and then turn it over to them and ask them their opinion of the new movie. But film executives are not having conversations like that with other people. And if you can display a level of deep knowledge about the field you're in, it is so useful and easily obtained. I mean, there are books that say, here are the 100 classic movies. Spend a year watching them. And subscribe to Variety. I wish I had done this. In any issue of Variety, you learn about things like holding deals, Schedule F, put pilots, things like turnaround, upfronts. There's a lot of slanguage in our business. And if someone enters the business speaking it, I wish I could have done that in the early days. I think it would have turned some heads. You business majors, we often think you're kind of a cult, the way you can talk. There's business terminology that sort of just exists for you. It's similar in the entertainment business, except there's nowhere really to learn it, except, I think, kind of reading Variety every day. Number 6, nobody knows anything. And this is something you should take advantage of. The next hit, the next trend, the next star, none of us have any idea. Young people with strong opinions who can break that down for like middle-aged executives, what's happening now, very, very useful. When I was in college, my father wanted to invest in a Broadway musical, and he brought it home. Good news, his son's a theater aficionado. He gives me the script and the CD to evaluate. You know, Dad, I read this. There's no falling chandelier. There's no helicopter. There's no revolving stage. These were things in the musicals at the time. It's kind of a downer, like, everybody's dying of AIDS all the time in the musical. And then everyone just wants to know how to pay their rent. Save your money. I stand before you today as an entertainment expert. Imagine it's the mid-'80s. Guy says, T.S. Eliot? He wrote The Wasteland, it's very famous. I'm going to do a musical, but not of The Wasteland. He wrote a book of poems about cats. And there's no story. There's just cat poems. And I'm gonna have music, and the actors are gonna come out with ears on. I know what I would have said. No one knows anything. Billions of dollars it's made. So an assistant with taste, or a person with taste, or a young agent with taste, or a young film executive with taste, who knows what they're talking about or can evaluate things is exceptional. For the rest of us who don't know what we're doing. Number 7, embrace failure. Or rather, I would describe it as separating failure from the feelings of failure. You fail, and you have to sort of practice saying, so what? My father, I told you, he had a very poor childhood. He became a very successful businessman over his life. And he used to talk about this issue with me, and he'd say, it's actually the opposite. He's like, I think when we talk about people, and if you sort of say, oh, someone's a failure, it's not a nice thing to say, but he's like, often those people, they didn't really fail that much. They failed 3 or 4 times, and they didn't like how that felt. He said successful people are the true failures. He's like, I could give you a list of 200 things that completely were abject failures that I did. Terrible, terrible ideas. He's like, but then one thing really worked, and suddenly nothing else matters. He's like, because I kept sort of getting up and trying it. And I thought it was a really useful thing because that introduction she gave me is a really amazing, grand introduction. And you could be tempted to say, oh, well, there's somebody who has it figured out. Look at that list of projects. Wouldn't it be great to wake up every day, doesn't feel self-conscious, trusts his judgment? I have no more trust in my judgment or lack of self-confidence than I did 20 years ago. And the only thing I think I've gotten better at is trying to really really ignore it. We had if you missed us at the Writers' House last night, we had a very deep conversation about the Lord of the Rings films. We had to be there. And it made me think of, there's this great episode of Extras with Ricky Gervais where he goes up to Ian McKellen and he says, how did you do this? How did you become such a great actor? And Ian McKellen says, well, I think about what a wizard would do. And then when the director says action, I do those things. And I just thought of that because it's sort of like, what would a person who was confident and believed in themselves and wasn't afraid, what would that person do? And then in spite of whatever your feelings are, I feel like I try to do those things. Number 8, build it before you need it. My assistant, Gretchen, remarked recently that all of the things that she saw in high school and college, all of the dynamics in backstage in the arts organizations are exactly the same as the things she's seeing happen on Broadway. Same kinds of hurt feelings about the same things, same kinds of arguments about the same things. And I thought, I have to talk about that. I wish I understood when I was here how important human relationships were. And that you never graduate beyond things like kindness and diplomacy and real honest-to-God problem solving and the difficulties of human interaction. I wish I got started on that so much earlier, and it was a good one. I think the entertainment business is a business of relationships. It's a cliche, but it's true. When I was promoted to agent, I was trying to sign A.R. Gurney, whose play I directed here, Love Letters, and I had been the assistant for his agent for many years. And I said, he went by Pete, and it was A.R. Gurney. I said, Pete, I'd love to be your agent. And he said, Jonathan, no offense, but a week ago you were getting me coffee. And I said, Pete, that just means I know how you like it. And he laughed, which was a good sign with him, and we started working together. And it's a little funny story, but it took 5 years for that moment to work out for me. Number 9, I'll go quickly here. This is what happens when you time it, and it's twice as long. Take massive action is what I have written down. I used to be very surgical. Let me think really long and hard before I do the thing that I think will get me to the next step on anything. Let me think really hard when I lose a producer. What's the single producer I'm going to go to and how? And now I really take the spaghetti at the wall approach. I do 10 different things at once. And that's just useful, I think, for your career in general, for anything. Do everything carefully, lots of things, but carefully, and then you see what sticks. I've wasted a lot of time being too precious about the next action. I feel like this is the best piece of advice, and it's probably evident to many of you. It was not evident to me. You've heard it said, life is not a dress rehearsal. Yet, we can rehearse. Something I learned in mood court was that I could predict I had 3 judges, 5 minutes, each judge was going to ask 2 questions. You can pretty much plan that and stage manage exactly how those 5 minutes are going to go. Because you can predict every question, and then you can write your answers. And then you can put your answers away and rewrite them the next day to be more articulate. And then you can look at them and inject some humor into it, and kind of have turns of phrase that are impressive. And then you can rehearse it so much that it feels as though you're making it up as you're saying it, because you know it so well. Kind of like you're in a play, and you've learned your lines. And I've done this so often for job interviews, important meetings I know that I'm going to have. I think it's very easy to predict exactly how everything is going to go down, instead of sitting there saying, I hope this interview goes well. I hope this meeting with my teacher goes well. I hope I perform well. You can actually control it, and you should start now exercising that control. I think that's everything I had to say. The only thing I would say is, when I was younger, I really kind of believed in this rugged individualism and entrepreneurialism, and the older I've gotten, the more I've realized that it really takes a village for anybody to get anywhere. And I have had so much help to every inch I've moved. So many people have been part of that. Dana Amendola was an alum from here who runs all of Disney's theaters in New York, who was very, very helpful to me in the beginning of my career. Professors I've named. Honestly, if it weren't for my mother, I would have run away and joined the circus. You know, some people, they survive despite the odds. I had every privilege, and I still needed my mother, like, throwing cold water on me every morning to get motivated and get moving. So, if possible, I would like to, she's watching this tape, I'd like everybody to give a round of applause for all the people who've helped us. I've really eaten up the time. I think I've just left 10 minutes for questions, but if anyone has any questions, I'm always the most nervous person to stand up, walk across the room, and ask a question. But if anybody has a question, I guarantee you, only my answers will be stupid. The anticipation builds. Hi.
Hi, my name is Tyler McGee. I'm a junior at Weber College House. I wanted to know, when you said that you were working as an assistant making $30,000 and your mom was your support, what, could you maybe elaborate on that a little bit more? Did you feel like, you know, you kind of had a gut reaction that that was the right thing to do, or was it more of just a, you know?
You know, I wonder if this is what you're getting at. One of the problems with that story is I had a safety net. So the decision to take that risk was because of work that my parents had done over many years to give me that safety net. And one of the things that my company has addressed in recent years is the assistant wages. Because there was an unfair outcome where if you were from an underprivileged background and felt just as passionate and were just as gifted, you were still not situated well enough to take that risk. So it's still an issue, but the company has raised the wages, I think, significantly, to the point where it's more doable if you don't have the safety net that I have. But my issues were only issues of pride. And those are not really issues. That's probably the fair answer. Is that answer?
Hi, my name is Safna. I'm a junior and I'm a film and media studies major. And I wanted to ask, how do you manage your time? Because in this industry, everything just sort of pops up and you kind of just gotta go with the flow. So I wanted to ask, like, how do you know, manage your time with work and also your personal life and with really taking in anything that comes to you at a time?
My wife, Shay, would tell you that I should manage it a lot better. It's hard. Time management is really hard. And I think the thing that helped me the most was theater. You know, theater really is, you need to be where your rehearsal starts, when it's supposed to start. You have to be on stage when you're supposed to be on stage. That was so much of my extracurricular life as a kid. I missed an entrance once in a community theater play of Larry Shue's The Nerd, which I actually now represent the play, which is probably karmic. But there was a scene where I had a magic catalog of new tricks, and I wanted to go backstage and read it. It had just come in the mail. I might have been 12. And there was a break. I had a long 45-minute break in the show, and I forgot that that break was after the next scene. And the look of fury on the adult professional cast members when they had to figure out what to do with the scene where somebody didn't show up. I mean, it's just as bad as you can probably picture. Those of you in theater, it was horrifying. And that probably, like, really, like, in a way, negatively impacted me to the point where I get everywhere really early. And I have a kind of a phobia about not being where I'm supposed to be. But basically, I mean, my technique for time management is I work backwards. You know, like, instead of planning the list forwards in time, I say, okay, if I have to be here, how many minutes, and then I work back in time. Not very glamorous. Does that answer your question? And also, I will say that things that were hard for me originally when I started my career, things that took a lot of thought, God, what do I do in this situation? Those situations have become less novel. So sometimes when something happens and an action is required, I have an instinct and a kind of professional course of business practice of what I do in that situation. So it requires less thought, and so it requires less time overall, and then more can be packaged into the day. Yes?
Hello, I'm David.
Hi,
I'm
David.
a freshman. I'm in WAVERLY College House, and I'm interested in dabbling in something you didn't write with throughout, but voiceover, the voiceover business, well, acting in it. Yes. You brought up a little bit about what an agent looks in for affording to someone, but what is your advice for like up and coming talents? Exactly what to do.
Advice for actors is a whole other discussion, and it's really hard. The answer is it's extraordinarily hard. And once my feeling, my personal feeling is once I let go of the idea of being a performer, all the doors opened to me. Because as hard as it is to achieve in a business setting and the competition, when it comes to acting, you don't know what the rules are. People lose jobs if they're not tall enough. Great actor, not tall enough. Great actor, you have the wrong look. I don't know how it's just hard to persevere as an actor. But they'll put you in touch with me and I can have a longer conversation with you about that.
Thank you.
Put the fear of God in you. I can.
Hi, I'm Priyanka, I'm a sophomore, and I've sort of been ruminating about what you said earlier, sort of like this balance of doing what you love but also figuring out what you're good at. And I feel like I struggle with that a little bit because there are so many things that I love doing, but I'm okay or mediocre at, and there are so many things that I'm like good at but don't really like love with a full passion. And I was wondering how you would say to like balance that question.
I think what you're asking is how do you see the forest when right now you can just see the trees? And I don't know. I think that the older you get, what year are you? I think the older you get, the more objective you can be about yourself. I was the least objective person about myself when I was your age and how I acted and a lot of the choices I made. And I think that listen to people, it's a stupid thing to say, but listen to your parents or parent figures in your life. They spend a lot of time with you and they know some things. What do your teachers think? If you ask for honest evaluation, if you say, look, we're close enough that it's not going to hurt my feelings, you owe me the service of risking hurting me to tell me the truth, people will take you up on it, and they may help you see things. Poll people, that's what I'd say.
So how did you decide to go to law school and like given your current profession?
I went to law school to please my mom and dad. A big part of my mindset is to live up to my parents' expectations. I heard Joe Biden, and somebody said, what's your goal in life? And he said, to live up to my parents' expectations. And it blew me away for the honesty of that. I realized that's me. And I was terrified to go into acting, go into the arts, because of the experience I had had previous to college in New York trying. And I had a sense of what it was. And I knew the truth. I knew I wouldn't get anywhere. And I thought, in lieu of knowing what to do, this can't hurt. And I really, not for everybody, but I'm so lucky that I deferred to them. My mother said, you'll be an entertainment lawyer. Maybe you'll find a way to make it all day. Oh, Mom, please. She was right.
All right, let's thank Jonathan.
Thank you.